Okay. So the primary barrier, as we all know, is the G. To prevent the reflux is the lower esophageal sphincter. So it normally works well in coordination with the diaphragm. So in these three conditions, only the lower esophageal sphincter opens. Number one is the in response to swallowing. So when the swallowed food reaches the distal part of the esophagus, then it will open. And second is to allow air to escape from the stomach when we take more food. So along with the food, we take little air also. So in the form of belching, we remove air. So in that condition, lower esophageal sphincter opens. And thirdly, at the time of vomiting. So these are the three situations when the lower esophageal sphincter opens. So if this barrier gets disrupted, the acid goes from the stomach to the esophagus. So food after being swallowed, it goes through the esophagus to the stomach, and in the stomach it gets mixed with the acid and breakdown process of food starts. And this acid, gastric juice, food which is confined to the stomach are blocked from going back to the esophagus by a valve mechanism. And this valve mechanism is made up of two muscles. So that is first is the lower esophageal sphincter and another is the diaphragm. So these two helps in preventing the reflux. So uh, in obesity, because of accumulation of fat in the angle of His, the fundus moves down and it rotates. And this steep angle is lost in this case, and there is more chances of developing gastroesophageal reflux disease. And regarding the larger fatty meals, so because of delayed gastric emptying or over distension, the stomach muscle thins out. So the important muscle which we have already discussed is this sling fibers. So it starts from the greater curvature, you can see, and goes down, and these are the clasp fibers. So circular manner, it is found in the uh, less lower esophagus. So because of this over distension, these muscles becomes uh, thinner and thinner, and as a result of that, the progressive opening of the angle of His takes place. The lower esophageal sphincter becomes hypotonic, and the intra-abdominal length of the esophagus is reduced or altered. So this is about the large fatty meals. So next we have this slide is showing this is the clasp fibers. So when it contracts and this sling fibers it contracts, so this makes the lower esophageal sphincter narrower, so thereby preventing reflux of the content. And here this is the normal relaxed condition. So subsequently, the phrenoesophageal ligament becomes weak. So this phrenoesophageal ligament is the normal condensation of peritoneal fossa, which is over the lower esophagus. So this phrenoesophageal ligament will become weak, and the pleural widening takes place. And this widening of the pleuras, this allows stomach to slide up through the hiatus into the thorax. So this is the diagram which is showing. So this is the Z line. So this is differentiating esophagus and the stomach. So here we can see the stomach is pulled into the thoracic cavity. So this is known as sliding hiatus hernia, and this is the rolling hiatus hernia, so, or paraesophageal uh, hernias. Okay, so these two conditions can be seen. So coming to the clinical features, so it can be typical, atypical, or alarming symptoms. So regarding typical symptoms may be aggravated by activities that worsen GE reflux, like recumbent position or bending over or overeating with meals rich in fat. So this causes typical symptoms. So like heartburn, epigastric pain, or regurgitation. And regarding atypical presentation, so in some cases, these extraesophageal symptoms may be the only symptoms present. And if these symptoms are evident, then this makes the diagnosis of GERD difficult, especially when the endoscopic studies are normal. So this can be non-allergic asthma or hoarseness, pharyngitis, angina like chest pain, erosion of dental enamels, or increased salivation, or it's known as water brass. So these are the atypical presentation. Now, patient can have some alarm symptoms. So these symptoms may be indicative of complications of GERD, like Barrett's esophagus or esophageal stricture, or the uh, carcinoma esophagus. So because of these conditions, patient may have symptoms. So this may be dysphagia, early satiety, GI bleeding, odynophagia, vomiting, unexplained weight loss, iron deficiency anemia, or choking. So these are the sets of symptoms which patient may present. Now coming to the diagnostic evaluation. So main tool of diagnosis is 24-hour pH monitoring. This is the gold standard. So first we should take history and all the symptoms. And second is the 24-hour pH monitoring should be done, and side by side endoscopy is advocated for diagnosis. So coming to the esophageal manometry and 24-hour pH monitoring. So this esophageal manometry is done to assess the function of the lower esophageal sphincter. And 24-hour pH recording is the gold standard for diagnosis of GERD. So here the most important finding is the transient lower esophageal sphincter relaxation. So this is altered in case of GERD. And this is the probe which is introduced. That day we have discussed, probe introduced, and this sensor is placed 5 centimeter above the um, lower esophageal sphincter. And this is kept there for 24 hours, and the recording is processed via the computer. We can go for endoscopy plus minus biopsy. So this is done to exclude other diseases and to assess any mucosal injury. Or sliding hiatus hernia can be identified if present, or mucosal biopsy can be taken to confirm any metaplastic transformation. So ideally, it is done when patient present with dysphagia, anemia, blood in stool, wheezing, weight loss, or voice changes. So in these circumstances, we go for endoscopy. So regarding barium swallow and barium meal X-ray, it gives best appreciation of gastroesophageal anatomy. It is not important in most patients with GERD. However, this is important if GERD is associated with rolling or mixed hiatus hernia. So when there is hiatus hernia, then it is of use. Otherwise, mostly we can diagnose it with the help of endoscopy. So regarding complications, so complications can be esophageal or it can be extraesophageal. Regarding esophageal, it is reflux esophagitis. So already we have discussed. Sliding hiatus hernia, there can be esophageal stricture, Barrett's esophagus, or adenocarcinoma. So hiatus hernia, Barrett's esophagus, and adenocarcinoma we will discuss in the next class. And next to that, we have the extraesophageal. We have laryngitis or recurrent pneumonia or progressive pulmonary fibrosis, mostly as a result of aspiration. So the aspirate goes into the lung, creating this problem. So this is about the complications. So next we have the treatment, how to treat. So we start with the general measures, or we say lifestyle modification. So first is weight loss. If person is obese, we have to advise weight loss therapy for the person. And we have to avoid the alcohol, nicotine, spicy food, tea, coffee, chocolates, or carbonated drinks. We have to avoid eating 3-4 hours before sleep. So one should not sleep 3-4 hours. Okay. Then we next is sleep in propped up position. Our patient is placed in the propped up, that is the elevated head and position. Or patient is advised to take small frequent meals. Instead of taking heavy meals, patient should be advised to take small frequent meals. So these are the lifestyle modifications which is to be started for GID patient. Next is the medical management. So medical management is given in the form of proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole, pantoprazole, H2 receptor blockers like ranitidine, or prokinetic drugs like cisapride, etopride, or mucosal protector drugs like sucralfate, colloid bismuth. All these things can help if the condition is not severe. And we have endoscopic treatment modalities also. This is applicable mostly for the early cases or with a small hiatus hernia. It is not applicable for all. So we have options like endoscopic suturing device where we placate the gastric mucosa just above the cardia to accentuate the angle of haze, or radiofrequency ablation can be applied to the level of lower esophageal sphincter, or injection of the submucosal polymer to the lower esophagus. So the aim is to create a good lower esophageal sphincter via this endoscopic treatment modality. So it is applicable for early cases or when the hiatus hernia is small. So next we have the anti-reflux surgery. So anti-reflux surgery is indicated when the medical management fails, or it is on patient's preference, or if there is GERD complications or medical complications secondary to large hiatus hernia, or atypical symptoms with reflux, which is documented on 24-hour pH monitoring. So in these conditions only, we go for anti-reflux surgery. So what is that surgery and what is the principle? So principle of anti-reflux surgery is number one, to restore the lower esophageal sphincter pressure twice the resting gastric pressure, then restore adequate length of intra-abdominal esophagus, reduction of hiatus hernia if present by opposing the cruras, and a tension-free fundoplication. So these are the principle. And regarding surgery, it is fundoplication. So many modification exist, and aim of fundoplication is to create a intra-abdominal esophagus, pleural repair, and we provide some sort of wrap of the upper stomach around the newly created segment of the esophagus, thereby preventing the migration of the stomach into the chest. So this is the main aim. So we have two types of fundoplication. One first is the complete type of fundoplication and another is partial. So complete fundoplication is also known as the Nissen's fundoplication. So here the fundus of the stomach is wrapped totally 360 degree around the lower 5 centimeter of the esophagus. And whereas in partial fundoplication, the fundus of the stomach is wrapped 180 degree around the lower 5 centimeter of the esophagus, either anteriorly or posterior. If you go for an anterior partial, that is known as Thales or Doers procedure. And if we go for a posterior partial fundoplication, that is known as Toupet's procedure. And these procedures can be done both via open approach and a laparoscopic approach. So this is the diagram showing the fundoplication. So this is the complete fundoplication. So here we can see complete wrap of the fundus around the lower end of the esophagus. But here on the other hand, we have the partial wrap posteriorly, can be seen in this picture. So Nissen's fundoplication was first described by Rudolf Nissen in 1959. And here the phrenoesophageal membrane is open and dissection of the diaphragmatic cross is done and the lower end of the esophagus is mobilized. So it is well mobilized so that it comes back into the abdominal cavity. So then mobilization of the entire fundus by ligating short gastric vessels are done. So these short gastric vessels will be there in the greater curvature, so that are ligated and divided for the mobilization of the fundus. And here both the vagal trunks are preserved. So next is that once this mobilization is done, a 60 French bougie is passed via the oral cavity into the stomach. And with this bougie in the lower end of the esophagus, the complete mobilization is sutured. Crural defect is repaired. And this finishes the surgery. So this is the diagram where we can see the dissection of the phrenoesophageal ligament. It is first dissected, and then this esophagus, lower end of the esophagus is mobilized. Once it is nicely mobilized, we can see this is the crura. These two cruras are opposed, or the crural repair is done so as to make the crural opening narrower. So this is one mechanism which is to be performed. And next is the wrap is done while the bougie is inside the esophagus. So the both end of the fundus is sutured around the esophagus. So this is the final picture. So this wrapping prevents the escape of the entire stomach into the thorax, okay, and it maintains the length of the abdominal esophagus. So coming to the complications, so there can be gas bloat syndrome. So here patient will be unable to pass the belt. So the abdomen will be distended mostly because of a tight wrap, or there can be dysphagia or inability to vomit, or there can be paraesophageal hernia, there can be splenic injury, or there can be esophageal or gastric perforation, there can be pneumothorax, or there can be sepsis as a result of mediastinitis, or septicemia, or failure or disruption of fundoplication. So ideally, the laparoscopic Nissen's fundoplication should be done. So next is the partial fundoplication. So controls reflux just like Nissen's, and here the advantage is that the gastric bloat is very less as compared to the complete fundoplication. So other procedures like Hill's operation. So technically it is a challenging operation and it is done intra-abdominally. And here what we do is the intra-abdominal fixation of the abdominal esophagus with the medial arcuate ligament. So these two structures are fixed with each other. So this is that procedure. Here this lower end is sutured with the medial arcuate ligament and this pleural defect is closed. This is Hill's procedure. Then we have the engine 6 prosthesis placement. Here after a reduction of the hernia, large size annular silicone gel filled prosthesis is fitted around the gastroesophageal junction. So a prosthesis is available that is fixed around the GE junction. So this is the prosthesis. So this is fit around the GE junction once the mobilization of the esophagus is complete. So this can be done. And lastly, we have the Belsay's Mark IV operation. So here we start with the left transthoracic approach. So we have to open the thorax. So left side of thorax is open, and there we first do this step, that is angle of insertion of the esophagus is restored by placing 4 intraepithelial sutures between anterior surface of the esophagus and adjacent fundus, so as to wrap the stomach around the anterior 2/3 of the esophagus. This is one. And secondly, a second row of intraepithelial mattress sutures are placed between the GE junction and the undersurface of the diaphragm. So first step is to make the angle of His, and next is to close the defect. So this is the procedure. First here, this is the apposition being made. So here the angle of His is maintained. So thereby the length of the lower esophagus is maintained. This is one step, and another step is this one, lower end is sutured with the diaphragm. So the diaphragmatic defect is also closed. So this is the procedure. So it has sequelae like reflux esophagitis, esophageal stricture, hiatus hernia, Barrett's esophagus, and adenocarcinoma. So we have discussed reflux esophagitis, esophageal stricture. In the next classes, we will be dealing with the hiatus hernia, Barrett's esophagus, and adenocarcinoma. Okay, thank you.